Welcome to another deep dive. You guys give us some fascinating historical documents every week, and this week is no different. This week's batch is all about Nazi Germany, specifically their social and economic policies.
Oh, yeah. These are interesting.
Yeah, I was really kind of fascinated with some of this stuff. These are excerpts from a document literally titled Nazi Germany Social and Economic. No beating around the bush there.
Straight to the point.
Yeah, and this is going to take us on a journey, really, into how the Nazis were able to consolidate power and really shape everyday life in 1930s Germany.
And they did that very effectively, unfortunately.
Yeah. We're going to uncover some of the methods that they used to control society through education, youth groups, women's roles, the economy, even leisure activities. So get ready for some aha moments as we kind of dissect the strategies behind their propaganda machine.
It's going to be scary, but fascinating.
Yeah, really chilling stuff, but really important, I think, to look at and understand how this happened so these kinds of things hopefully don't happen again.
Yeah, it's really a fascinating look into how the Nazi Party was able to establish a totalitarian regime piece by piece.
Yeah.
They understood that true control meant shaping the very fabric of society.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they started young. This first document we have here is about the education system. Under Nazi rule, it's really quite alarming.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It highlights just how systematically they used education as a tool for indoctrination.
Yeah.
You can see it in the curriculum. History classes were rewritten
Oh, wow.
to portray Britain and France as enemies.
Oh.
And to glorify Germany's military past.
It's almost like they were trying to rewrite history.
Yeah.
And they didn't stop at textbooks. They even brought in army officers to be teachers.
Exactly. To ensure that this message of military strength was constantly reinforced.
Wow.
And even more disturbing, children were encouraged to report teachers who deviated from the Nazi curriculum.
Wow, that's a level of control.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, hard to grasp. I mean, imagine being a child in that environment, constantly worried about saying or doing the wrong thing. What kind of impact would that have on a young mind?
The psychological impact was undoubtedly significant.
Yeah.
They understood that to truly mold a society, they needed to start with the most impressionable minds.
And that leads us to the youth movements,
Yes.
like the Hitler Youth and the League of German Girls. Now, on the surface, these appear to be, like any other youth group,
Yeah.
summer camps and uniforms. But looking at these documents, it's clear that these organizations served a much more sinister purpose.
Absolutely. While the activities for younger children might have seemed harmless, marching, map reading, the older boys in the Hitler Youth received intensive military training, including weapons handling and survival skills,
Oh.
and essentially preparing them for military service from a very young age.
And for the girls, the focus was on domesticity. The League of German Girls emphasized housekeeping, childcare, all things related to being a wife and a mother. I mean, it's as if they were trying to engineer specific roles for boys and girls within their society.
That's exactly what they were doing. They were creating a future generation of loyal soldiers and subservient homemakers,
Yeah.
all completely devoted to the Nazi ideology.
And the impact of these groups extended, beyond just, like skill building.
Oh, yeah.
There's a document here detailing how these organizations were used to extend the Nazi ideology into families, even encouraging children to inform on their parents.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
It's turning the home into a battleground.
It was a chilling tactic.
Yeah.
To ensure compliance and to weed out any potential dissent.
Yeah.
These youth groups became an extension of the Nazi surveillance state,
Oh, wow.
reaching right into the heart of German families.
And they also use these groups for fundraising, and creating this illusion of widespread support for the Nazi Party. It's almost like a twisted marketing campaign,
It is.
targeting children.
The Nazis were masters of propaganda. They knew how to manipulate symbols and imagery to create an appealing facade, even when the underlying reality was far more sinister.
It's all starting to paint a very clear picture of how they methodically went about solidifying their control. But it wasn't just the children they targeted. The documents about women in Nazi Germany post-1933 are quite shocking.
Yeah. The Nazi regime systematically restricted women's lives, pushing them out of the workforce and back into traditional roles. This was a key part of their strategy for social control.
It's disheartening to read about professional women teachers, doctors being dismissed from their jobs solely because of their gender. I mean, it's a huge step backwards for women's rights.
Their goal was clear: confine women to the home. Nazi propaganda glorified the ideal of the German mother, whose sole purpose was to raise strong, racially pure children for the fatherland. They even introduced the Mother's Cross,
But what?
awarding medals to women based on how many children they had.
Wow, that's taking control to a whole new level.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine being told that your worth is solely based on your ability to bear children. It reduces women to mere vessels for the state's ideological goals.
It's a disturbing reality at that time. They even offered financial incentives like marriage loans and child allowances to encourage early marriage and large families. It was all a calculated effort to boost the population with Aryan offspring.
Speaking of Aryan offspring, what about this Lebensborn program? It seems they encouraged procreation with SS officers, even outside of marriage, to achieve their goal of racial purity.
Yeah, the Lebensborn program
Yeah.
is one of the most disturbing aspects of the Nazi regime's social engineering.
Hmm.
Aimed to manipulate the very gene pool of the nation, promoting the idea of a master race, while simultaneously dehumanizing and persecuting those they deemed racially inferior.
It's truly a horrifying example of how ideology can be twisted to justify the most inhumane actions. They were controlling every aspect of life from the classroom to the bedroom. But how did their economic policies fit into this larger scheme of control?
That's where things get even more intriguing.
Yeah.
On the surface, Nazi Germany appeared to be an economic miracle,
Really?
achieving full employment and becoming a major economic power in Europe.
Huh.
However, the documents reveal a far more complex and manipulative reality behind this facade.
So their economic success was all smoke and mirrors.
To a large extent, yes. One of their key tactics was rearmament and conscription.
Okay.
By rapidly expanding the military, they created a huge demand for labor.
Uh-huh.
This, coupled with drafting millions of men into service, effectively removed them from the unemployment statistics.
So they weren't really solving the unemployment problem. They were just masking it by turning a large portion of the population into soldiers.
Exactly.
That's pretty deceptive.
They also implemented the Reich Labor Service, RAD,
Okay.
which put young men to work on public projects like the Autobahn construction,
Okay.
presenting it as national service.
So instead of being unemployed, these young men were essentially providing free labor for the government under the guise of patriotism.
Precisely. And to further control the workforce, they established the German Labor Front,
Okay.
a Nazi-controlled union that eliminated strikes and workers' rights.
Workers couldn't even quit their jobs without government permission.
Correct.
Wow. That's taking control of the economy to an extreme level. It seems like individual freedom was practically non-existent under this regime.
It was a carefully crafted system of control designed to prioritize the needs of the state above all else.
Yeah.
But they needed to keep the workers content, so they introduced the Strength Through Joy program, or KDF.
I've heard about the KDF. They organized leisure activities like concerts and trips, even cruises. It sounds almost too good to be true.
And it was. While the program did offer some genuine benefits, it was also a clever propaganda tool.
Uh-huh.
The funds workers contributed towards a savings scheme for a Volkswagen car.
Oh, wow.
Were actually diverted to finance weapons production.
So not only were they controlling their jobs and suppressing their rights, but they were also secretly funneling their savings into the war machine.
Yeah.
Talk about a web of deception. It's astonishing how they managed to create this illusion of economic prosperity while racking up massive government debt.
Indeed, and we can't forget that they deliberately excluded women and Jews from unemployment statistics, further distorting the true state of the economy.
Right.
But the Nazi obsession with militarism went far beyond mere economic manipulation.
Yeah.
It was ingrained in their ideology and permeated every facet of German society.
That brings us perfectly to our next topic. Militarism. The documents paint a stark picture of a nation consumed by military fervor.
Absolutely. The Nazi regime poured resources into a massive rearmament program, producing tanks, planes, ships, and weapons at an alarming rate.
Wow.
And as we discussed, the Hitler Youth was effectively a training ground for future soldiers.
And with conscription, the army expanded from 100,000 to a staggering 1.4 million men. They even used the Spanish Civil War as an opportunity to gain combat experience and refine their military tactics.
Yeah.
It's clear they were actively preparing for war.
They were not simply content with building up their military, they were actively seeking opportunities to test it and flex their military muscle on the world stage.
It's a chilling realization, especially knowing what we know now about the horrors that were to come.
Indeed, and to understand the full extent of their grip on the German psyche, we need to look at events like the Nuremberg rallies.
Okay.
These were more than just gatherings, they were meticulously staged spectacles
Yeah.
of Nazi power and propaganda.
The documents describe these massive gatherings in a purpose-built stadium, with military marches, flags, drums, and torchlight processions. It must have been quite a spectacle.
Imagine 152 aircraft searchlights illuminating the night sky, creating this dome of light visible for miles.
Wow.
It was a carefully constructed spectacle,
Yeah.
designed to overwhelm the senses and reinforce this message of Nazi power and unity.
And of course, there were the speeches by Hitler and other Nazi leaders, further solidifying their grip on the hearts and minds of the German people.
These rallies were a potent blend of theatrics and propaganda, all designed to evoke awe and inspire fanaticism. They were a key part of how the Nazis solidified their power and prepared the German people for the path to war.
So far, we've seen how the Nazis systematically infiltrated every aspect of German life, from education and youth groups to the economy and military. They crafted this narrative of prosperity and national rejuvenation while tightening their grip on power through manipulation and control.
It's truly a chilling example of how a totalitarian regime can rise to power and exploit every aspect of society to achieve its goals.
Yeah, this deep dive is revealing just how calculated and comprehensive their approach was. But we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover about this dark chapter in history, particularly the devastating human cost of the Nazi regime. Ready to delve further?
Absolutely. Let's continue this exploration, ready to delve deeper into the darker side of Nazi Germany.
Yeah, let's do it.
Exploring the horrific consequences of their ideology.
Yeah.
These documents provide a chilling look at the systematic persecution of Jews and other groups deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime.
It's heavy stuff, but it's important to confront these uncomfortable truths head on. Where do we begin?
Well, let's look at the Nazis' systematic persecution of Jews,
Okay.
which escalated from discrimination to outright genocide.
Yeah.
The documents detail a step-by-step process, beginning with the Nuremberg Laws in 1935.
The Nuremberg Laws, weren't those the ones that stripped Jews of their citizenship?
Exactly.
And
Your rights.
These laws made them stateless.
Yep.
And vulnerable.
Yeah.
They were also prohibited from marrying or having relationships with Germans.
It was a blatant attempt to isolate and dehumanize an entire group of people. It's almost as if they were trying to erase their very presence from German society. And I imagine it wasn't just limited to legal measures.
You're right.
But-
Social ostracization became widespread.
Yeah.
Boycotts of Jewish businesses were encouraged, and propaganda relentlessly demonized them,
Yeah.
portraying them as enemies of the state, parasites, even subhuman.
It's sickening how they use propaganda to incite hatred and fear, turning neighbor against neighbor. Did this climate of fear and prejudice directly contribute to the violence that followed?
Sadly, yes. This systematic campaign of dehumanization paved the way for Kristallnacht, the Night of Broken Glass,
Right.
in November 1938.
Okay.
It was a night of orchestrated violence against Jewish communities
Yeah.
across Germany and Austria. Kristallnacht, that's when synagogues were burned, businesses destroyed, and countless Jews were arrested or even killed, right?
Yes. It was a terrifying escalation of violence, a clear signal that the Nazis' persecution of Jews was spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
And tragically, it was just the beginning. The documents detail the establishment of concentration camps, initially intended for political opponents.
But the concentration camps quickly evolved into something far more sinister.
They became a vast network of forced labor and extermination centers. The conditions in these camps were absolutely horrific: overcrowding, starvation, disease, torture, and systematic murder. It's difficult to grasp the level of cruelty inflicted on innocent people.
I'm looking at a document here that describes the meticulous planning that went into the Holocaust.
Yeah.
It's chilling to see how calculated and deliberate their actions were.
It's crucial to remember that the Holocaust was a meticulously planned and executed genocide driven by the Nazis' twisted ideology of racial purity.
Right.
They targeted not only Jews, but also Roma, LGBTQ individuals, people with disabilities.
Anyone deemed unfit for their vision of a perfect Aryan society.
The scale of it all is just staggering. Millions of lives lost, families torn apart, entire communities wiped out. It's almost too much to comprehend. It raises a lot of questions about how such widespread complicity was possible.
And touching upon a crucial point, it's essential to examine the factors that enabled the Nazi regime to carry out these atrocities.
Yeah.
The complicity of individuals and institutions, and the global response to the unfolding genocide. Those are all critical aspects of understanding the full scope of this dark chapter in human history. This deep dive is certainly shedding light on the complexities of this period, but I'm ready to delve deeper. What other factors contributed to the Nazis' rise to power?
All right.
And allowed them to carry out such horrific acts? So we've been exploring some truly harrowing aspects of Nazi Germany, uncovering the systematic persecution and extermination of millions during the Holocaust. It's hard to even fathom how such a horrific event could occur. What were the circumstances that allowed the Nazi regime to carry out these crimes?
It's a question that haunts us to this day. It wasn't simply about Hitler's ideology, It was a complex interplay of social, political, and economic forces that created a fertile ground for the Nazis' rise to power.
So what were these forces? What made the German people susceptible to Nazi propaganda and, in many cases, willing to turn a blind eye to the escalating persecution happening around them?
Well, remember the state of Germany after World War I and the Great Depression.
Yeah.
The nation was crippled by economic instability and a deep sense of humiliation. The Nazis expertly exploited these feelings,
Right.
promising a return to prosperity and national greatness.
It seems they offered a scapegoat for the country's problems.
Precisely. They blamed Jews and other minorities for Germany's economic woes. They offered a simple yet dangerously appealing solution: racial purity and national unity.
Fear and economic hardship certainly played a significant role in their rise. But I'm looking at a document here that highlights the relentless use of propaganda to demonize Jews and other targeted groups. How significant was propaganda in shaping public opinion?
Propaganda was absolutely crucial to the Nazi success. They were masters at manipulating information.
Yeah.
And using every available medium.
Right.
Radio, newspapers, film.
Even
children's books to spread their message of hate and division.
Yeah.
They created a culture of fear and suspicion.
Right.
That permeated all levels of society.
It's a chilling reminder of how easily propaganda can manipulate people, especially when it taps into pre-existing prejudices and anxieties.
Yeah.
But was it just propaganda? Weren't there more forceful methods used to silence any opposition?
Yes. The Nazi regime quickly established a police state.
Right.
Where dissent was ruthlessly crushed.
Wow.
People were afraid to speak out, fearing imprisonment or even death. This atmosphere of fear and intimidation was a critical factor in their ability to maintain control.
So it was this toxic mix of economic hardship, scapegoating, propaganda, and a climate of fear that allowed the Nazis to implement their horrific agenda. But it wasn't just about the actions of a few fanatics at the top, was it? This document mentions the complicity of a much larger segment of society.
You're right. The Holocaust wasn't solely orchestrated by a small group of individuals. There was a broader complicity, both within Germany and across occupied Europe, that allowed these atrocities to occur.
What do you mean by complicity? Were there others directly involved in carrying out these acts?
In some cases, yes. Collaborators in occupied countries assisted the Nazis in rounding up and deporting Jews to concentration camps. But complicity also took more subtle forms.
Right.
Turning a blind eye. Remaining silent.
Right.
Or even benefiting from the expropriation of Jewish property.
It's a sobering thought that so many people in various ways contributed to this tragedy, even indirectly. It raises questions about the responsibility of individuals and institutions when faced with such evil. What about the international community? Were other countries aware of the atrocities taking place?
There was some awareness, but the full extent of the horrors remained largely hidden until after the war.
Right.
Allied governments received reports of Nazi atrocities. But there was a reluctance to believe the scale of what was happening.
So there was a failure to act.
Yeah.
A failure to grasp the magnitude of the genocide as it was unfolding. What prevented a more forceful intervention?
There were certainly logistical challenges and political considerations that hampered a more effective response. The ongoing war effort consumed much of the Allies' resources and attention.
Right.
However, it's also a tragic reminder that even in the face of unimaginable evil, the world can sometimes fail to act decisively.
It's a sobering lesson that underscores the importance of vigilance and the need to actively combat intolerance, discrimination, and persecution wherever they arise. The Holocaust serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked hatred and the fragility of human civilization. Where do we go from here? What can we learn from this dark chapter in history?
Well, the Holocaust must serve as a constant reminder of what can happen when hatred and intolerance are allowed to flourish.
Yeah.
We must remain vigilant against all forms of prejudice and discrimination.
Yeah.
We must learn from the mistakes of the past and commit to building a future where such horrors are never repeated.
This deep dive has taken us through some dark and challenging territory, but it's been an incredibly valuable journey. We've explored the rise of the Nazi regime, their systematic manipulation of German society, and the horrific consequences of their ideology.
It's crucial to remember the victims
Yeah.
and learn from their suffering.
Yeah.
We must continue to research and educate ourselves about this period in history to honor the memory of those who perished and to ensure that such atrocities never happen again.
You've provided some incredible insights today. This deep dive has been both informative and deeply moving. We encourage you to continue exploring this period in history and to reflect on the lessons we can learn to prevent such atrocities from happening again.
Remember, history has a way of repeating itself if we fail to learn from its lessons. Let's all commit to creating a world where such horrors are consigned to the past.
Well said. And with that sobering thought, we come to the end of our deep dive into Nazi Germany. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep questioning.